The only sound was the heavy thud of the courtroom doors closing behind me. I stepped onto the polished tile, and the entire room just stopped. Every person, every breath, froze in place. I saw her first. My mother, Marian, a woman who valued appearances above all else, let out a strangled gasp, her hand flying to the pearls at her throat. Beside her, my father, Robert, a man who built his entire identity on a legacy he hadn't earned, went impossibly white. He gripped the plaintiff's table so hard, his knuckles looked like bone. Then there was my sister, Friend Chloe, the family's radiant golden child, who dropped her expensive designer purse. I watched, almost in slow motion, as her lipstick and keys scattered across the floor, but my eyes went to the man on the dais. The judge, an older man with a stern face, slowly lowered his glasses. He looked at me, then at my parents. His gaze wasn't just confused. It was darkening with a cold rising fury. His voice trembled, but not from weakness. It was rage. "Mr. and Mrs. Jensen," he said, his words cutting through the silence. "You filed the petition. You submitted the affidavits. You said she was gone." They couldn't answer. They just stared, their faces a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. They were looking at a ghost. And in a way, they were right. 72 hours earlier, I wasn't in a courtroom. I was in a sterile, soundproof debriefing room at a DIA facility, the kind of place that officially doesn't exist. I was exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired that comes from 38 months of living a lie. Across from me sat my handler, and Director Cade Pratt, a pragmatic man in a stark suit who never wasted a single word. He slid a legal document across the steel table. "Welcome back, Spectre," he said, his voice flat. "You were in the black for 38 months, no comms, no trace, per Operation Black Fog's protocol. While you were dark, your family got ambitious." I picked up the papers. The title jumped out at me. Petition for Presumptive Death, Alara Jensen. My own name. I read on. Motion to absorb assets. They weren't just declaring me dead, they were using my abandonment to legally seize the 6-figure trust fund my grandmother had left only to me. The trust she'd set up specifically because she saw how they treated me. How they'd always seen me. The final hearing, I realized with a jolt of cold acid, was tomorrow. All those years of being the disappointment. The quiet one. The boring government clerk who'd just run off. This was the payoff. I wasn't just forgotten. I was an inconvenience, to be erased. A bank account to be liquidated. The anger wasn't hot. It was cold. It was precise. They thought I was just the quiet, disappointing daughter who'd run off. They had no idea they were trying to steal from a ghost. To understand the reckoning that was coming, you have to understand the 2 lives I was living. To understand, you have to go back. You have to see me as they saw me. I remember this one dinner, just before I took my first long-term assignment. The entire evening was a shrine to my sister. Chloe had landed a new brand deal. For a face cream. My father, Robert, a man obsessed with the appearance of wealth after failing as a broker, raised his glass in a toast. He beamed at her, to Chloe, the brains and the beauty of this family. Finally bringing some real success to the Jensen name. My mother, Marian, just clapped, her eyes shining with pride. It was just so typical. Another Tuesday. I waited for a lull, and then I mentioned my own news. "I've been assigned to the embassy in Kyrgyzstan," I said, keeping my voice neutral. The air went flat. Marian sighed, that familiar, disappointed sound that always felt like a small pinprick. "Oh, Alara, Kyrgyzstan? Still just a government clerk? And in such a dirty place? Why can't you be successful like your sister?" Before I could even respond, my father chuckled and waved his hand dismissively. "A secretary, Alara. Just call it what it is. It's a dead-end, paper-pushing job, but at least it's a paycheck. Don't worry, you'll find a husband there." I just nodded. I sipped my water. Inside, that old, cold feeling settled in. It wasn't anger anymore, not really. It was just tired. the sheer crushing weight of being so completely, fundamentally unseen. I looked at Chloe preening over her face cream, and then I thought about my paper-pushing job. I thought about the 3 months of psychological screening I'd just passed, the polygraphs, the grueling training. A secretary. It was almost funny. In fact, it was the entire point. My dead-end job was a non-official cover. A knock. My clerk status was the perfect camouflage, giving me access to places a declared agent could never dream of. While Chloe was posing for Instagram photos in a rented studio, I was sitting in a sterile, silent safe house in that dirty country, running a high-value asset. I was the one silently gathering the intel that would dismantle an arms-dealing network before it could destabilize an entire region. My family saw a failed daughter. My agency saw a ghost. My boring paperwork was, in reality, a series of highly classified reports that went directly to Director Cade's desk, completely bypassing the normal station chief channels. I was a GS-15 clandestine service officer. My salary alone was more than my father's best year as a broker, not that they'd ever believe it. The irony was, I was recruited because of them. The recruiters saw what I had learned to be my entire life, the gray woman, the one nobody ever noticed, who could sit in a room and be completely invisible. The girl they all dismissed, who happened to have level 6 clearance and fluency in 3 languages they always called a waste of time. For years, I let them believe the failed clerk narrative. It was the perfect cover. My invisibility was my armor. They thought I had no power. They forgot that the one thing a paper pusher knows is the fine print. And they'd just committed perjury. That cold, precise feeling I'd felt in the debriefing room. It crystallized. This wasn't about a family argument. I wasn't going to call them, crying, asking how could you. No. They had declared war using legal documents. They had tried to erase me with procedure. So I would respond in kind. This wasn't going to be an emotional reunion. It was going to be a counter-operation. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was planning a procedural annihilation. I sat in a secure conference room with Cade and a stoic, sharp-eyed lawyer from the DIA's Office of the General Counsel. He had my file open. They lied, I stated. It wasn't a question. They claimed due diligence in searching for me on the sworn affidavit. The lawyer nodded, tapping his screen. They never contacted the embassy in Kyrgyzstan, did they? Not a single email, not one phone call to the boring clerk's office. He checked a log. No, not once. They actively avoided any channel that might have proven you were alive. Good, I said. I can't reveal where I was. Operation Black Fog's file is sealed. The lawyer nodded again. You don't have to. He turned to his laptop and began to type. He was drafting a simple, terrifying document, a letter of active service on official embossed dia letterhead. It would be signed by Director Cade himself. It stated in no uncertain terms that I, Alara Jensen, was in continuous, non-permissive service to the United States government and precluded from all personal contact by order of National Security Directive 114. When he finished, Cade reviewed it. This is a kill shot, Spectre. We can have this messengered to the judge's chambers in an hour. The case will be over. I looked at the letter. I thought of my mother's fake tears, my father's greedy eyes, my sister's smug smile. I thought of all the years of being the secretary. I shook my head. No. They built this lie in public. They are performing this lie in open court. I'm going to correct them. In public. They want me to be dead? They can tell that to my face. My family was so excited to attend my funeral and collect their prize. They had no idea they were walking into my debriefing. And I was about to be the one asking the questions. I stood just outside the heavy wooden doors, listening. I could hear my mother, Marion, her voice thick with performative sobs, telling the judge how they missed their dear Alara every single day. My father, Throbert T., would be right beside her, nodding gravely, playing his role as the grieving patriarch, completely devastated by the loss of my trust fund. My sister, Chloe, I was sure, was sitting in the front row, probably already mentally redecorating her condo with the money. I waited for my mother to hit a peak in her fake anguish, And then I pushed the doors open. The thud of the doors closing cut off her testimony mid-sob. Absolute deafening silence. The scene I'd walked into? It was exactly as I'd seen it in my mind. My mother's hand flew to her pearls, her gasp sucking the air out of the room. My father's face went white, his knuckles gripping the table. Chloe's designer bag hit the floor, her lipstick and keys scattering like rats. The judge, his face a mask of thunder, stared at me, then at my parents. His voice was a low growl, vibrating with fury. "You said..." She was gone. For a full 10 seconds, no one breathed. My father was the first to find his voice, or at least a panicked imitation of it. He shot to his feet, sputtering, his eyes wide and wild. "Your Honor, this is a trick. A cruel trick. This isn't her. It can't be." He was looking right at me, but his brain, so committed to the lie, simply refused to accept the truth. I took one more step forward, my sensible heels clicking on the tile. I let the moment hang, letting him see the ghost he'd tried so hard to create. "Hello, Father," I said. My voice was calm, cold. It cut right through his panicked bluster. Before he could sputter another lie, a woman in a dark, severe suit stepped forward from the back of the courtroom where she'd been waiting for me. This wasn't a family lawyer. This was the DIA's general counsel. This was real power. She addressed the judge, her voice crisp and devoid of all emotion. "Your Honor, I am counsel for Miss Alara Jensen. My client is demonstrably alive." She held up a single, heavy-stock envelope with an official seal. A bailiff took it, handing it up to the bench. "This," my lawyer continued, "is a letter of active service which should clarify my client's status for the period in question." The judge took the letter. He broke the seal. As he read, I watched his face. His eyes scanned the page, and then they widened, just slightly, but it was there. He saw the letterhead. He saw the signature from the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He saw the official, terrifying phrases, Non-Permissive Service and National Security Directive 114. He looked up from that single piece of paper, and his gaze met mine. For the first time in my entire life, I saw someone in a position of authority look at me with something that wasn't dismissal. It was respect. A deep, sudden, profound respect. Then, he turned that gaze on my parents. And the respect was gone, replaced by a contempt so pure it was almost visible. "This letter," the judge said, his voice now booming, "confirms Miss Jensen has been in continuous service to the United States government, precluded from all personal contact." He didn't just look at my family, he glared at them. He lifted his gavel and brought it down with a crack that made my father physically flinch. "Petition dismissed. With prejudice." He wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into Robert and Marion. "And that is the least of your problems. You didn't just make a mistake," he snarled, holding up their sworn affidavit, the one I'd read in the debriefing room. "You signed this document claiming you had exhaustively searched for your daughter. You lied to this court. You committed perjury to steal her assets." My mother started to make a small whimpering sound. The judge ignored her. "I am referring this entire file to the district attorney's office for immediate investigation into perjury and conspiracy to commit fraud." That's when the masks didn't just crack, they shattered. My mother's face crumpled, the fake grief replaced by the very real, ugly terror of consequences. My father, the man obsessed with his image, looked trapped, his faux rich guy persona disintegrating into a pathetic, sweaty panic. And Chloe, her face was frozen in a comical look of disbelief, the realization hitting her, the money was gone. And her parents, her perfect, successful parents, were criminals. My father had spent my whole life calling me a nobody. In the end, it only took one piece of paper from one clerk to prove he was the one with the dead-end life. I walked out of the courthouse alone, my lawyer beside me. The city sounds, a distant siren, traffic, people talking, rushed in to fill the silence of the courtroom. The sunlight felt warm, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I just breathed. I didn't feel triumphant, not in the way you see in movies. I just felt finished. The operation was over. The file was closed. My lawyer and I shook hands. A simple, professional gesture. "Well done, Miss Jensen," she said. I nodded. "Thank you for your services." Moments later, the heavy doors burst open behind me. I heard a flurry of shouts, the rapid-fire click 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 of cameras. I didn't turn around. I didn't have to. I knew what they were seeing. My family, stumbling out into the sunlight, their faces a ruin of shock and public humiliation, straight into a wall of local news reporters. The perjury filing had alerted the press. "Mr. Jensen, is it true you tried to steal your daughter's inheritance?" "Mrs. Jensen, did you lie to the court?" I heard my father bellow no comment, and my mother's pathetic sob. I just kept walking. I never looked back. 1 year later, the last piece of paperwork on that case was filed. My father, Robert Eyre, and my mother, Marion, were convicted on all counts. Perjury and conspiracy to commit fraud. The judge had been unmerciful. They were sentenced to 18 months in a low-security federal prison. Their assets were seized to pay the court fees and the massive fines. The life they had built on appearances, their entire world of lies. It just evaporated. My own life in that year had solidified. I was no longer Spectre, the deep-cover ghost. My time in the field was done. I'd been promoted, and with that promotion came a new, public-facing role, or at least public within my world. I now stood at the front of a lecture hall at the farm, the agency's training facility. I was an instructor, co-leading the tradecraft course for new case officers. All those years of being the gray woman, the invisible daughter, it was now my core curriculum. My invisibility had become a legendary case study. I taught them how to be overlooked, how to be underestimated, how to use the world's dismissiveness as the most effective armor and the sharpest weapon. The recruits watched me with a kind of focused awe. They saw me. They saw the authority, the competence. They saw the clerk who had dismantled an entire network. This was my new reality. My true family was a man like Cud Bend. He'd come down to guest lecture my class. Afterward, we stood by the window, drinking terrible cafeteria coffee. We didn't talk about my family. We didn't talk about the past. We talked about a new recruit, about a flaw in a training protocol, about the state of the world. It was a simple, quiet conversation, built on years of deep, mutual respect. It was more real, more validating than any loud, fake toast my father had ever given at a holiday dinner. This was where I belonged. I was in my new office, a real office with my name on the door, reviewing a mission proposal. It was quiet, the way I liked it. An email notification popped up on my screen. My heart didn't leap. My stomach didn't drop. I just looked. The sender was Chloe. I hadn't heard from her in over a year, not since the trial. The subject line was just 2 words, "Please, Alara." I opened it. My eyes scanned the first few lines. They have nothing left. The house is gone. You're the only one who, they're your parents. She was begging for money, begging for me to intervene, to save them from the consequences of their own actions. I read the words and I waited for a feeling. Anger. Pity. Even a dark spike of satisfaction. Nothing came. It was just text on a screen. The desperate plea of a stranger I used to know. The emotional connection had been so thoroughly severed, there was nothing left for the hook to catch. I thought of all the years I had craved a single word of acknowledgement from them. All the years I would have done anything for their approval. And now, here it was. The final, desperate plea for my attention. And I felt absolutely nothing. I moved my mouse. I clicked block sender. I didn't hesitate. I then clicked archive. It was a simple administrative task, the last piece of paperwork from a very, very old file. I took a sip of my coffee and turned back to the mission report on my screen. My real work was waiting. My family tried to bury my name to steal my inheritance. But they forgot one thing. In my world, we write the obituaries. And I was the one holding the pen. Have you ever had to choose between your family's narrative and your own truth? Share your story in the comments. In this community, we know that true strength is built in silence.